Hi everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and on this episode of Wandering DMs, we're going to be talking about the new One D&D rules draft that was just released 3 days ago. And this one is on the expert classes of rogues, rangers, and bards. And so we're going to critique, we're so excited to be able to critique those as DMs who've played every edition to date. So I think we're in a good position to give some perspective on what the changes look like historically, and we'll be talking more, all that and more today on Wandering DMs.
Now, Dan, this is the second PDF they've released, expert classes. I presume that the third one will be called Companion, maybe? Is that
No? That's sort of a deep cut, depending on how far back you play D&D. Fantastic. The claim is that the initial claim was that they were going to have a drop like this every month. One interesting thing is for the one that came out. I mean, so they just barely got this into the month of September, right? So this came out September 29th. So they barely managed to squeak one into September. And among the comments they're saying is the one that came out in August. I guess they're processing over 40,000 surveys submitted on that, and the time for feedback is closed. So they only have a window for feedback on one of their documents up until the next one gets released. So actually, the time for feedback on that first document is over, apparently, and now they just want people focused on this one.
I mean, I applaud that they're trying to do a process, right? I think it's great that they're releasing bits and trying to get feedback and like testing their stuff. We're big fans of testing. Yeah. Test your stuff, right?
Definitely.
I will say though, like, I don't know, this is probably just a personal preference. But I've always I like my systems light and easy to digest. For me, like the basic D&D book comes in at 64 pages, and that's like the sweet spot for me for the size of a rule book. And I was reading this one, this second PDF, which covers 3 out of 12 classes that are going to be released in this game, was 37 pages long. And there's no art. This is just text. And I'm thinking, holy crap, how many of these are there going to be? How big is this book going to be?
Yeah, and you pointed out that they say they're going to have, by the time they're done, they're going to have 48 subclasses, and this document only has 3 subclasses in it. So there's quite a bit of more territory to go. And if there's approximately 37 pages every month for the next year and a half, maybe, I don't know, year. It's sizable. It's sizable. Now
it's not just additive, right? It's not just additive, like you were pointing out.
Correct.
That this document contains amendments to the first document, right? Fascinating.
So they have a section at the back they're calling rules glossary, which is a very refined presentation of changes they want to make to core rules, up to and including how a D20 roll works, as well as other abilities and statuses and things like that. And so the document here, and Crawford in an interview said every single document we release, the rules glossary at the end entirely supersedes what came before. So at this point, ignore the entirety of the rules glossary changes from August, and now you just focus on this. And one thing that pops out, go ahead.
Does that mean is it meant to be comprehensive? Do you know, like if something simply does not appear in a subsequent rules glossary, does that mean it was removed?
I think so. I think that is exactly what they're saying with that. Yeah, and in particular, the real standout is, and we overlooked this change when we talked about the first document a month back. Is the first document changed the rules for how attack rolls make a little bit. I could not detect what the change was, but other people were much more on the spot. The change was only player characters can make critical hits. Monsters could not make critical hits. And so I think there was a lot of pushback on that. I personally really had a foul taste in my mouth about that. And interestingly, what immediately came to my mind on the monsters can't do critical hits is Gary Gygax predicted this in 1978. He had an article in Dragon number 16 in 1978 where he said the whole idea of critical hits is fundamentally offensive to the core system of Dungeons and Dragons, because what's going to happen is there'll be a push for only player characters do it, monsters don't, and that's inequitable. And that's clearly going to happen at some point, and that's why I don't want to see critical hits at all in the system. And at least as far as the August One D&D document, that's exactly what happened. But that's not there now. That is gone as of September. So and Crawford's claiming that these changes aren't necessarily even based on the feedback. They're not done going through the survey. So he's saying we plan on just iterating a bunch of changes from month to month just to see what sticks or what people are happy with. So that seems to be a change that was there just for a month and is now gone.
So does that mean that so by the current document, are we saying that there are no critical hits at all, or that critical hits operate like they used to?
I will pull that up. You know what? That occurred to me. Just before we started. So I'm going to guess that it's the same as what it always used to be. Attack roll. Yes, this Unearthed Arcana article uses the rules for attack rolls and critical hits found in the 2014 Player's Handbook. So that is very explicit that that currently they're sticking with what occurred before.
Yep.
Let me just throw up a comment from William here in the chat that I think I agree with. So William's pointing out the whole do players and monsters, NPCs follow the same rules seems to be one of the major fronts in game design philosophies. And I will say that the original creators of D&D, Gygax and Arneson and Frank Mentzer, were very explicit that they wanted equity between, as much as possible between monsters and players, and things like give monsters a fair shake. And Mentzer really not liking sweep attacks because only players get that. So that was very much on their mind, and obviously that's critiquable, and some people might not share that design, but that was very much on the mind of the original creators, for what that's worth.
Fascinating. Let's dig into what's actually in the document, right? Like the major focus of this document is classes, right? Specifically expert classes, which is, I think, amusing to me to lead with a group called experts.
Yeah, and what is that, right? So that's a new term, right? Expert classes is not a term that previously existed in 5th edition. And among the new categorizations is they have this idea of class groups, which hasn't existed until before now. So they're kind of holding this out as a new systemic thing. But you and I know, Paul, that this is actually a callback to exactly how classes were categorized back in 1st edition. And they got rid of it in 3rd and 4th.
Mm-hmm. Here, I'll put this up on screen. This is the idea of class groups, right? So this document includes this idea that classes are now being grouped, and there are 4 major groups: experts, mages, priests, and warriors, which, is a convenient way. At first seemed like a convenient way of like, great, we don't need to include all the classes in one document. We can split it up across 4 documents. But also there's mention in there about how sometimes, like, even though the groups don't have any specific rules themselves, sometimes other rules will refer to a group. So, this rule applies in this way if you're a member of this class group, which is interesting. And frankly, the term experts is interesting to me because for me, that immediately called back the term specialist is the other word I would think of to use for this group, which is, back in OD&D, right? That's before thief was even a class. You maybe wanted to hire NPC specialists, right?
Good point.
Good point. Yeah. So it seems to make sense to me that rogues end up in this group. The other thing that jumps out at me, frankly, looking at this list, I'm like, there are 4 groups, and gosh, those 4 groups look a lot like the original 4 classes, don't they? Fighting man, cleric, magic user, and then eventually with supplement 1, thief.
Those are the first 4 classes. Those are the first 4 classes exactly. And Disparel in the chat, among other people, is pointing out that this is exactly how it's 98% the same as how things were presented in 1st edition and 2nd edition. And the one little wrinkle is that you had, I guess we would call them primary classes of fighters, clerics, magic users, and thieves. And then all the other classes were considered subclasses that used the same rules, plus some modifications, is how it was pointed out. But it was exactly these 4 categories, all through the early era of D&D. And I think what Despero's pointing out is the names, right? First edition used slightly different names from them, but the names in this list, I think, are exactly what you saw in second edition. So they specifically called those primary classes mages, priests, warriors, and I think experts. Yeah.
Let's look at that first edition chart, right? So here you go. I mean, monk is interestingly hanging out there at the bottom, but right. Fighter, magic is thief. Monk is its own weird thing.
Mm-hmm. And of course, what's not showing up on this list? What's in the player's hand? What's in first edition but not on this list? Anyone in the chat? It's one of the classes we're talking about today.
What is missing? Gosh, nope, Rangers are there. Let's go back to the other list. Bards are missing.
There you go, Bards. Because in first edition, they're quarantined in the appendix. That they're optional as of those rules. And of course, someone was guessing Barbarian. That didn't show up until the first edition Unearthed Arcana supplement, so it didn't exist.
Right. Alongside Cavalier and Thief Acrobat and some other unusual classes that you don't really see much of these days.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh well, that's fascinating though.
For what it's worth, I've been writing about these exact topics the last 2 weeks on my blog on Delta's D&D Hotspot. Specifically for the purposes of you had to roll particular abilities to get into those classes in first, second edition. So I was looking at the probabilities of succeeding at those things, but I had to look very carefully at those class lists and how they changed from first edition to Unearthed Arcana to second edition, actually. So this was very much on my mind and kind of struck me that this came back because this idea of categorizing them was removed in third edition. It wasn't in third, it wasn't in fourth, it wasn't in fifth. They tried to say all the classes are all their own unique things. And interestingly, when this gets rolled out here this week, Jeremy Crawford, the lead designer, scrupulously doesn't say that this is a returning idea, right? They hold this up. Here's a brand new idea of it's going to make it very simple. We'll have a magic item that says, oh, this can only be used by the mage class group. Oh, so simple. What a great idea. But yeah, this is a carbon copy right out of first, second edition.
I mean, other things that jump out at me at looking at this list. One is interesting, I think, is there's a little bit of categorization change here that seems unusual to me. One, sticking Ranger in with the experts. Like, I think we're much more used to Ranger being a fighter type or a warrior type.
Yep.
But then I suppose that was done to make room for the Monk to go under Warrior, which Monk, as we saw even in the old chart, was like a weird, what is Monk exactly? We don't know. A thing.
Yeah. Initially, when monks were first invented, they were a subclass of clerics.
Right. Which doesn't really make sense because they don't have spells, right? And they do seem to focus more on melee attacks. Yeah. So I could understand wanting to get monks under warriors. Ranger under expert seems a little odd, but this presentation of Ranger is really leaning into like light armor, right? Or medium armor. Yeah. You're not, they're more leaning into that sort of woodsman trope, I think.
Yeah, I'll have more to say about that. To me, on this particular list, the biggest surprise is putting paladins under priests. And maybe that's because I'm super old school, but of course, paladin was the very first subclass ever invented, and they were a special type of fighter. So I'm certainly used to seeing paladins be a brand of fighter all through my gaming.
When I was running a BX campaign, when we were dealing with just 7 classes, no races, 7 classes. The big thing that a lot of folks coming from later editions of D&D missed that we eventually house ruled in were paladins and rangers. Those were the 2 major subclasses that we felt we would like to see in the game, and so brought those in. And yeah, I'm used to those being, as we could jump back to the first edition list, those are subclasses of fighter. Like in this list, fighter loses both of them. That's fascinating, right?
Yep.
Both of them go away, and instead we get fighter, barbarian, and monk. Very interesting.
Now, for people following closely at home, the thing that we're not going to mention is in first edition Unearthed Arcana, there was a 5th primary class brought in called Cavalier, and the Paladin was removed from fighters to Cavalier. We are not going to talk about that.
I'll also say, I feel like it's interesting that, we're assuming that this is done, in this mode of like, well, we need to make the game more approachable to newbies, right? And so what's kind of left unsaid is, hey, a long list of lots of classes is overwhelming to new players, right? And it seems like they're walking this balance of wanting to be able to say this game is easier for new players because look, there's even advice in there of like, oh, you're making a brand new party, you really should have at least one person from each group, one character type.
What
from
an
each
idea!
Group. An
what a
party.
Great idea! You should have one of each of those things. Wow.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the classic
on the other
art,
hand,
right? You could pull classic original D&D art from the get go. Like here's your party of 4 people, and they're one of these things.
Yeah. On the other hand, they're also trying to tout, look how deep our rules are. Look how many options there are. We have 48 subclasses, right? Holy cow, 48 subclasses. Which I go, oh my god, 48 subclasses.
Right.
Whew, that's a lot.
Of course, the meaning, there's a couple of great points you just touched on, Paul, there. Of course, the meaning of the word subclass has changed from what you and I are used to in first, second edition, right? So subclass was a class that was related to a primary class. You could be a fighter, or you could be a paladin, which is a fighter plus extra, alterations to it. So nowadays, and I believe this is actually new in the 5th edition oeuvre, is they're using the word subclass for those pathways that you get to pick, like around 3rd or 4th level. Of I'm a wizard, and at 3rd or 4th level, I get to pick a school. Am I in the school of abjuration or the school of conjuration, whatever? Or if I'm a bard, I get to pick what college I'm in. Am I in the College of Lore or something like that? And I got to admit, looking at 5th edition stuff up until now, I thought it was really weird that they didn't have a global term for all of those things. You had to separately talk. Am I talking colleges or schools or archetypes or something else? And I got to admit, personally, I support having a single solitary term for all of those choices. And that is a little bit different than what I'm used to using the term subclass for.
To me, this version of subclass is very reminiscent to 3rd edition prestige classes or 2nd edition kits, right? This is a thing that gets added on. And frankly, it always reminds me, frankly, of coming more from the world of video games where you have things like skill trees, right? If you remember, like playing good old Diablo and trying to decide, or maybe it was Diablo 2, right? Trying to decide, okay, is my wizard going to go down the fire or the ice or the, which branch of magic am I going to specialize in?
Right. Yep. Totally. But, it's for some of us, it's uncomfortable to have these terms shift underneath us. So, I'm playing 1st or 2nd edition, and subclass means one thing. And now as of 6th edition, I'm going to call it, subclass, the same word is getting used for something different, and sometimes that bothers my brain a bit. I can understand, but I actually support that. I think they need one term for all those things that are really the same, and that is a move that I would have made too, frankly.
Dan, there's one other thing here in the text that talks about just classes in general that I wanted to get your opinion on. I'm going to show it up here on the screen because this jumped out at me right away. Just at the very beginning, where it's defining what even is a class, telling us that classes contain rules about your character, and most of the inhabitants, I've got it highlighted here, it says most of the inhabitants of the multiverse aren't members of a class. I'll go back, and it says characters who have levels in a class are exceptional. Classes are the exception, Dan. Most inhabitants of the multiverse do not have a class. What do you think about that?
So that's very classic. That's very classic from original D&D. There was the concept of a normal man initially, or level 0, and so I'm accustomed to seeing that myself. Most monsters don't have classes, things like that. And just talk about humans in the campaign world. Most of them were unclassed. So I'm accustomed. I think 3rd edition tried to fix that, but I don't think it was a good idea. So I'm very comfortable, and I agree with this.
Yeah, it's always struck me as a kind of problematic, though, just from the concept of you're telling me that people who have a class are exceptional, but it seems like as you play D&D, especially as you start throwing in, oh well, these NPCs, these people of power, the Baron of this realm, this major NPC, they're clearly exceptional as well. They have to have class levels. You know, these monsters. So you start coming with rules. Sometimes we're like, this monster has some class levels. We start doing that, right? And my gut says, gosh, for something that says like someone who has a class is exceptional, there are a lot of exceptional people. And I'm immediately reminded of the old Garrison Keillor line of of his hometown being where all the students are above average, like
right.
or frankly playing. I remember back in the '90s playing in a LARP where everyone in town is a PC because you don't have the bodies for people to portray common, ordinary people of the town, and I'm like, it's weird. This town is full of heroes. There's a lot of heroes in this town. Maybe you get that in MMOs too, right? Like everyone's a hero.
True.
Where are the normal people?
Yep. There should be. I mean, I think like at a tabletop role playing game, it's easier to hand wave that there's several hundred or several thousand people walking through the streets in the market, and they're all unclassed. It's very easy to get a biased sample for these kinds of questions. And for what it's worth, I was watching a pretty good video this morning of someone critiquing One D&D and the upcoming business model specifically, and saying that this is actually going to be hard for non-neurotypical people. And she said, I think that there's more non-neurotypical people playing role-playing games. And I thought, yeah, I mean, I sympathize with that. I mean, I feel that probably I'm in that category. And when I play role-playing games, everyone around me is probably all non-neurotypical. That's the typical thing. Everybody around me is all non-typical. When you're in a particular niche subculture, that's very easy to happen. So if you're heroic in D&D and you're exceptional, have classes, quite likely you're going to be in a room with a lot of other exceptional class people. I feel that.
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely starts to break things for me. I feel like in just terms of world building, that like it's hard for me to imagine a world where there are people running around who are this much more amazing than the rest of the world, right? That would be a very, very different place from the world we live in, right? That's very, very different from, right? How would that impact society if you had people running around with these crazy powers? I think more than we just.
I think that you and I have debated this in other design questions in the past, actually.
Yeah.
And I mean,
it's tough, right? Because I think it digs back to the idea of just how much power are we talking about, right? And I'm reminded of the pamphlet that Matt Finch wrote about what is old school gaming, right? And one of his points is it's not super heroic, right? You're not playing Superman, you're playing Batman, you're playing people who are ordinary people but are very well trained and have a lot of abilities but are not like crazy powerful. Anyway, I brought this down such a weird tangent. I apologize. It's interesting to me. It's very interesting to me to take this stance and bring it out and highlight it right away to say that most inhabitants of the multiverse are not members of a class. You're special.
I'm gonna note this as a possible future show topic, Paul, because I think I and our viewers are interested in digging into this, but that wasn't the point of today. I think I want to go into this prepared. That's a discussion I want to go into prepared.
Okay, great. Let's pocket that one.
That one. What a great topic. So let me touch back on another thing you said. Is the you kind of touched upon the tension between lots of choices, right, and winding up with a big document and lots of subclasses, and the tension of, well, then for a new player, how do you even start to make those choices? And so a bit of a tension between lots of options for customization and analysis paralysis, and have it be difficult for new players to make a decision. I've seen that happen at the table when I shifted to 3rd edition. I've totally seen new players get stymied at making decisions between the ability scores and the races and the classes and wanting to understand all that stuff. So what they start doing in this document, I think for the first time, they're very explicit about it, is that they start giving default options for every single choice. So for all the equipment, you get a package of equipment. You get this equipment, or you could take the money and you can go shopping. The feats at every single level. Here's the feat that you get. Or you could go pick one of the other feats if you like. The spells. Here's all the prepared spells that you will have at every single level for the entire lifetime of your character. Or alternatively, you could go pick other ones.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, we're certainly used to the idea of saying, like, there are lots of options, and then maybe that's too much, so here's a prepackaged set that you can just take the standard package, right? And this is flipping that on its ear and saying, like, definitely the way it's presented, it's the same rule. The rule hasn't changed. But the presentation is, you definitely have this. Okay, if you want, you can customize it. Which is fascinating, right? So I put it up on the screen here for the prepared spells. That's the one that jumped out at me. Just literally starts with, you have the following spells prepared. Boom, 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 boom. Alternatively, you can prepare 2 0-level spells and 1 first-level spell of your choice. It seems like a very awkward way of presenting that. You think it's smart? Yeah.
No, I said this is for bards, is what I was saying specifically.
Oh, this is for bards. Okay. I've got the bard one up, but I think it does this for every spellcaster.
Absolutely, of course. Yep. Plus all the feats, plus the equipment, plus some other stuff. I agree with you, Paul. I feel like this is awkward. It's maybe it's just because it's new, but it does feel awkward to me that it kind of buries. I feel that it kind of buries the idea that there's a larger spell list. Frankly, I feel like I could almost overlook that because you have these italicized parts. That I think that's what I'm going to visually focus on. And then this, alternatively, you can do something else that I guess is in some other page of the book that I need to go look at that I might not understand. I don't know. And the other thing is it winds up, if they're going to do this, because they do this here for every single separate level of Bard, from Bard level 1 to 20, here's the new spells you're going to be preparing. And that takes up a lot of text. I feel like that list of just default spells takes up as much text as the rest of the class description.
So this is interesting then, because I kind of want to segue from here to another topic, and it's I just want to point out that we're about half an hour in, and we haven't even talked about the 3 specific classes that are in this document. But here's a thought that struck me. So one of the big reactions I'm seeing online a lot to One D&D in general is actually some pushback around the way it's being sold. Right, a lot of people seem to be very unhappy about the fact that we're moving away from you buy the game and now you own it, right? You bought the books, we're done, versus what appears to be moving into more of a subscription model, right? You're going to go onto D&D Beyond, you're going to buy licenses, that has a renewal rate over a period of time, more content will be released, there's add-ons that you can buy, etc. But basically, you're going to be paying for this forever.
Right.
Now, this makes sense to me on a business side. And you pointed out that maybe this is just unique to my perspective, but my gut says historically Wizards of the Coast has been in the business of selling paper, whether that's books or magic cards or whatever. Their business model is we sell paper, and paper is a dying industry, and Wizards knows this, and they want to change that and say, let's instead be in the business of selling software. And sure enough, that's how software gets sold these days, is, licenses and subscriptions and renewals and changes and whatnot. So all of that makes a lot of sense to me from a business vantage. Whether it's good for the customer or not, I don't know. But all that makes sense. So why did I bring that up? What jumps out at me in this is, like, what's the UI going to look like, Dan? Is this really how they expect us to consume these rules? Or am I going to go into D&D Beyond and license the books and hit the character builder? And then in the character builder, it's going to go, here are your spells. Click this checkbox to customize.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
That's my gut says that's what it's going to look like, right? You're going to make a new character, and it's going to go, boom, you get spells. Here they are. Your spells. These are your spells. Click here to customize.
Yep, that seems quite likely. And
that's,
to be
clear, better. Yeah, sorry, go on. I keep cutting you off.
I don't know. I'm not in the habit of building stuff online in the first place. I will. So first of all, I agree with the people critiquing that. Right. So that was the fundamental topic of the video that I was looking at earlier this morning. And thanks to our patron Ash for actually pointing that out on our Discord server. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen that. So I agree. It hits me. I feel like it kind of stabs me in the heart in a bad place if that's how things are going to twist into. Yeah, I think that the UI probably will be like that, or maybe it'll just be like it fills out your spells and then click here to change the spell.
Yeah, yeah,
could be.
Yeah, I think the presentation in the digital mode is my point. Is I think presentation in the digital mode will be easier to digest and feel more natural than it does as written here in text.
I see.
Yeah, which I think is very interesting.
So the nuance that I would add to that discussion, and we've said this before, is of course, Wizards has tried to make this move in the digital now going on 25 years, and they have never managed to execute. Obviously, they brought in some executives who are coming from software companies like Microsoft. So, of course, my standard idiom is everything in the entire world is all impossible right up until the day that it finally happened for the first time. So maybe this will be different now. But of course, Wizards is part of Hasbro. What's the business of Hasbro? It's not fundamentally software. It's toys and board games and physical things you'd sell in a store. Yeah. So trying to make Wizards a software company, they have kept smashing grandiose projects against icebergs for many years now, and I don't know if they're going to be able to. They've gotten in trouble in the past, right? I think that was one of the primary claims about 4th edition is we're going to make this more like a massively multiplayer online game.
Yeah.
And not many people appreciated that a lot.
I mean, so I will say,
screen right now is the rules getting mangled in order to work well with the virtual online system or not again.
I will say I will push back a little bit on the their portion of Hasbro in as much as I think Hasbro is trying to make this move as well. I think that the digital gaming department of Hasbro is rapidly growing, and I know a lot of people in the video game industry that I've worked with in the past who currently work at Hasbro.
Really? Okay.
Yep. All right. Yep. It is, and not the Wizards part of Hasbro. We make all those classic Hasbro board games you're used to. I guarantee you those are all on the Play Store on your phone. Go take a look.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. Actually.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I mean, the world is going in this direction. Is my claim. That's. This is the way society is progressing.
Hopefully, they can give jobs to some of the people that are being let go from Google Stadia and stuff like that, or the Amazon game attempts. Right? There's a lot of big companies that are not video game companies that try to make this switch and then dump a whole lot of cash down a money pit.
Yep, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy to pivot. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's a different kind of industry. Anyway, that's what you get on Wandering DMs. You get insights specifically about software gaming, and we can't restrain ourselves.
And what about this idea though that generally you're going to buy by subscription and stuff is going to auto update under the covers, and you don't have to worry about it because digital UI is just going to work. Boom, boom, boom. Click the button. It's fine. You don't need to consume all the rules up front. You can just tinker with UI. I mean, I've played games of D&D where we came at it via D&D Beyond, where we, yes, some people had the book, but others just had their tablet and they opened up D&D Beyond and they made a character and they only dug into the rules as needed. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And
I feel like
it's going to allow for much more complexity of games, right? Like my cantankerous, I only want 64 pages worth of rules. That goes away quickly when the rules are automated by software and you don't have to read them anyway, so whatever.
But it generally becomes more restrictive that DMs can't just by fiat at the table start changing stuff that we're accustomed to, or, rolling out new house rules or add things to the game. So it looks flexible like that to begin with, but it really has got to be more restrictive than the anything goes on paper while we talk to each other game. let's talk about these classes. We should
Yeah,
before the
sure.
hour is up. We should actually talk about the
We
three
should talk
classes
about
that are in this document, right?
Great.
Okay, so let me deal with rogues first. Okay, so to my eye, right, and all these classes are altered somehow. The overall table of classes and levels and hit dice and proficiency bonuses, those things are all identical. The number of spells per level for the bard is identical. In some ways, this document is trying to hew much more closely to 5th edition than some other edition changes that we've seen. So that I feel like that's interesting. The rogue, to my eye, what I want to call a thief, seems like it's changed the least. There's just a couple things that have moved around in their ability list, and more or less, it pretty much looks the same as how it used to be. So, and that's your fundamental thief. That was your 4th primary class in original D&D. It's kind of a mainstay. I'm not too surprised about that.
I think the interesting thing to me about the thief, I will say, or the rogue. Let me say the rogue, right? Because thief is the subclass they present here. I think someone earlier asked a question. I'm missing it. Someone asked like how many subclasses per class we're going to see, and I think my math suggests there will be 4. Right? If there's going to be 48 total subclasses, and we're seeing
exactly
12 classes, I'm going to guess 4. Okay. So, right, but these documents only give us 1 subclass per. So the interesting thing about the rogue, I will say, especially the way, like, say, terminology saw the rogue in 4th edition, is that we end up focusing on the sneak attack ability, or backstab as we used to call it. That seems to be the primary, like, all rogues have this. And then thieves are interesting because they get all of your kind of classic cat burglary, hide in shadows, move silently, etc., type of stuff. Am I right about that, or am I making this up?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
I think that's it. And so it's an argument. There's an argument that possibly thieves are more like a fighter than a rogue, because they're they deliver a specific kind of melee attack. They favor a single. They're your glass cannon. They're a melee fighting, high damage, low armor class.
That would be an interesting novel perspective to me. I think, and we had a whole episode just about sneak attacks, right? This year. So we hashed that out, and I think there's a lot of different ways to assess whether the thief gets a sneak attack or not. And I think that maybe by the original books, it was pretty rare. It was hard to carry off. Maybe it would only happen once per combat. And I would say maybe initially the backstabs were a fairly rarely utilized feature, and the other stuff was maybe more important. And over time, in order to give more equity in a fight, we've been more and more generous about permitting the thieves to get their sneak attacks. So I feel like that's maybe colored a bit historically. Is that coherent?
I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah. And I do think that is a move that we're continuing to see happen. Now, maybe it's been around since 5th edition and is not really that different in this document, but it's interesting to me that it more and more we're focusing in on sneak attack and further away from classic thief skills, as I think of them. Right? Which in OD&D, that was always my thought of why are you bringing a thief? Well, we need someone to find and remove the traps. We need someone to
I see what you're saying with that.
Right.
A lot of the thief abilities here are, and I think this is, you could say this as far back as at least 3rd edition, but a lot of the abilities are combat based. There's cunning action, there's uncanny dodge, there's evasion, there's elusive, and all these things are combat related. There's also reliable talent, which is more what we think about. There's subtle strikes, that's combat related. So you're right, most of these abilities are combat related, actually. One thing I'll point out is, again, on the everything gets a default, is at 3rd level, when you're going to pick your subclass, again, the language here is you gain the thief subclass if you're rogue. You gain the thief subclass. Or another rogue subclass of your choice. So everything is all phrased that way.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, generally, I agree. that the thief, especially the thief subclass as it is presented here, pretty similar to 5th edition rogue.
Right.
Very
much so.
You want to talk about bards or rangers?
I do want to talk about bards, yes. Someday we ought to have a whole. Someday we ought to have a whole hour-long bards discussion, actually. So the things that I notice about bards is they're getting more healing abilities. So they're getting these, I believe, these added default spells as they level up of Healing Word and Restoration, and they can use their Bardic Inspiration in combat to heal. But for me, the biggest twist is Bardic Inspiration used to be, I give Bardic Inspiration in advance to one of my party members, and they get to decide when to use it. Now, that decision entirely is retained in the hands of the bard, and when somebody fails a check, the bard can decide to give them inspiration right this very second. And the decision of when to use that remains in the bard's hands instead of the person they inspired. That kind of rubs me the wrong. See, once again, that's like to me that feels like a mechanical thing that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense in the fiction. So the whole idea of bard inspiration is the bard would sing or tell you a poem, and now you're jazzed up and you've got an adrenaline rush when you go into the fight, and you're better going into the fight. And now I don't entirely understand why this is called Bardic Inspiration. Like if I see you drop a cup mug, if I see you drop something like a die or something, Paul, I can't yell at you and go, be better, pick it up, catch it, right? And have you suddenly be faster in the instant that you're trying to do something. So I have a hard time wrapping my head around what the fiction is trying to tell us of the bard within a particular instant managing to make somebody better. Or maybe it's retroactive. Maybe it's retroactive. I told you a poem 5 minutes ago, but we didn't bother to say it. And now we're retroactively saying I did that. That's the kind of thing that was my read of it. Super happy.
That was my read of it. Is that we have to metagame a little and we'll step away and rewind time. But I did this thing.
As an old schooler, I'm not fond of those tropes. Yeah, that bugged me.
I mean, because the fiction does say, right, I'm reading it right now, it says, you can supernaturally inspire others through words, music, or dance. This inspiration is represented by your Bardic Inspiration die. Sounds like,
So you still think it happened right in the past, is what you're saying?
Yep. I mean, and then it talks about exactly what you said, about using it after the roll, and it says the creature rolls a die as the number, potentially turning the failure into a success, right? Like, yeah, I mean, in the fiction, it seems to me that, somehow, I don't know. It seems weird that it's like altering the course of natural events.
Yeah. That's not for me. But, not my favorite way of doing things.
I mean, that touches on heroic inspiration, right? What they're calling heroic inspiration, which just used to be called inspiration. Right. Which we see in this document in the rules section, right? And I think that
you're about to. I think we're about to hit the big change to how D20 attack rolls happen here.
Right? Because heroic inspiration gives you advantage after the fact, right? You decide after rolling the D20. Yep. There you go.
But again, the heroic inspiration was on your sheet. So you received it previously. That's a known fact in the game. And then again, it's in the hands of the person with the adrenaline rush to decide when to use it. I'm less bothered by that. Now, so now we're going down this pipe. Clearly they've been unhappy with how much this inspiration idea gets used in the game. So previously it was the DM says, this is something that gives you inspiration, put it on your sheet. And as an amateur 5th edition player, it seems like not many DMs have actually been using that so much.
Yeah.
So I think the designers are a little bit frustrated.
In all the games of 5th edition I played, the answer was it got used not at all.
There you go. And so thank you for that confirmation. And so here in this document, they're clearly trying to find mechanical ways to inject it more often in your game. And in this document here in September, the way is, did you catch that? Did you see how there's more inspiration going to happen? You roll a natural one on a 20 and you get inspiration. How do you like that? Roll a natural 1, you get inspiration bonus.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a way to I mean, I do like, frankly, okay, first of all, I don't like the idea in general. First of all,
Yeah.
right, when I was playing Savage Worlds, bennies are about one of the first things I want to get rid of. I don't
There you
like you get these magic points that you get to use, and I especially don't like it tied to and it's a reward the DM gives you for doing a good job, or you know, it was often good role play, which is such a subjective thing, and inevitably it means half the table gets them and half the table doesn't. Or oh, you did a really good job at this, which means what? That you rolled really well, you rolled high. So in that case, it's just roll a 20 and get inspiration. Would you feel better if it was roll a 20, you get inspiration?
I think they've considered that. I think here's my take.
Yeah.
I think I would feel better if it was roll 20. I mean, from my perspective, again, you ought to hurt on a 1. Your 1 really ought to make you very sad as a character and a player.
Yeah.
And I'm used to using some kind of fumble rule on a natural 1. That's what ought to happen there. But more fundamentally, and I agree with you on both points, Paul, about Savage Worlds, is as an amateur game designer of things like my Book of War game rules that we're playing Thursday nights now. If I try to inject a rule and it keeps giving me trouble at the table, and we forget about it and it doesn't work properly, that's a sign I should remove it. It wasn't a good idea. If it doesn't work at the table, that's a sign I should remove it. It wasn't a great idea. And if the current D&D designers are frustrated by inspiration not being used enough, the proper solution is remove it. Make the game a little bit simpler, get it out of there. And obviously that is a mechanic that has been seen in other games. Do not try to make D&D every single game in existence. Don't try to mash together every mechanic ever seen in a TTRPG, right? It's don't multiply these things endlessly. That's a rule that's apparently not working for D&D. Just snip it out. That's the right answer.
Okay. I want to ask you a question here about heroic inspiration, because this is the argument I see coming up based on this rule. I rolled a natural 1. Oh no, you fumbled, but I gain heroic inspiration. Can I spend it right now? Right now on the roll? That was a natural 1? Heroic inspiration gets played after I fail a test, right? I can spend it to gain advantage.
Cut it, sell it.
Yeah. And I feel like it's not in the spirit of the rule, because I'm reading the text right here, and it says, this heroic inspiration represents a character's resolve to do better after fumbling an attempt. Sounds like it is, right. Yeah. I'm not
I vote cut it. I vote cut it. Yeah. You're clearly scrambling around in desperation, trying to fit more inspiration in the game. It's not working. That would be my suggestion. But we should talk about Rangers, right? So before we got about 5 minutes to talk about Rangers, and I feel that you pointed out it's like that was the first thing that popped out at you of being more odd to be in the expert category class group. And I feel that Rangers probably have the largest number of changes in this document, and in particular, it seems to my eye that they get a lot more magical. Like many of their abilities that used to be kind of concrete in the fiction have now become all magic. And that includes, so ever since original D&D, when Rangers were first invented, they've had the idea of a favored enemy. And to begin with, there wasn't any choice about it. It was just like you fight giants was your favorite enemy. And here that favorite enemy has been replaced by a spell. So you don't pick a particular, lifetime opponent. Now you have a Hunter's Mark spell that's always available, and you can mark any opponent with that and get additional abilities or advantages against that particular opponent. So it could be anybody with the Hunter's Mark spell. Where you used to have a hide in plain sight ability, which previously was described in 5th edition as you're going to put mud and camouflage and twigs on yourself, like in Predator, and people won't be able to see you. That has been replaced by the Nature's Veil ability, which is now described as you're invoking spirits to magically hide from view. And likewise, where they used to have a multi-attack ability or multiple weapons, it's now a Conjure Barrage spell. So I feel like to me this seems like a very significant step away from D&D having a little bit of gritty, dirty realism in the Ranger to now it's all magical fairies and sparkles everywhere. And to me, that's a little bit rattling.
I feel like the Ranger has always been for those players who really, really, really want to be Aragorn, right? And right, the Ranger class was clearly based on Aragorn, right? He hates orcs.
100%.
He, can hide in the mud. He, fights with a bunch of different weapons. This is what Aragorn does. He can find the trail, and he can also dig up some magical healing herbs in the woods in a pinch.
100%.
I don't know. He's a friend of elves, so I guess maybe he has like a line towards magical stuff. But yeah, no, it's a stretch. It's a stretch.
Yeah.
This is definitely. I would say you're right. You're absolutely right. This is definitely a major change in how Rangers are presented. It feels very different.
If it was just one thing, I probably wouldn't bring it up. But they've clearly overhauled all through the whole list of abilities and changed stuff from gritty, you're hiding in mud, to you're invoking spirits to magically disappear. And to me, that's it catches my eye.
Yep.
Catches my eye. Yep.
Dan, we are almost out of time here, and I just wanted to touch on something we haven't talked about, which is epic boons.
Boons. Which is a type of feat, right? Which is a type of feat, to be clear, that's only available at the top level, 20th level. The game only goes to 20 levels. That's the end. And so more generally, right, I think we mentioned this last time, is they clearly have made feats more fundamental to the game. Previously, and Crawford says this in his interview, you got an ability score increase every couple levels, and optionally, if the DM permits it and uses this rule, you could use something from the optional feat system. Now, in this document, it's twisted around the other way, and it says every couple levels you get a feat, and that's part of the core rules now. And if you want, you can spend that feat on an ability score increase. And then in addition to that, they have these epic boon feats you get at 20th level, which really twists the rules around. For example, one of the epic boon feats is you always hit with every melee attack, period. Or you always hit with every ranged attack, or you get plus 40 hit points, or you have proficiency in all skills in the game. So they're very much at that 20th level, really just going to totally willing to just break some rule entirely. How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I mean, it's not like you always hit, right? The epic boon is you use it once, and then, I think you got to wait till next turn to use it again.
Okay, well, I mean, all right, yeah, okay, so once a turn, I guess, yeah, you're right.
Yep, once a turn, right? And probably at 20th level, I'm guessing you have, I don't know, 3 or 4 attacks, right? Probably.
Okay,
somehow.
Great.
But still, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what caught my eye about epic boons is the very first place in the document they're introduced is a note about here's what's different about classes in this document. Guess what? We moved all of the old 20th level feats to 18th level so that there would be room at 20th level for epic boons. And I'm like, what the hell's an epic boon? And frankly, my gut reaction is like, who's playing at that power level? That's my reaction. Are people really playing 20th level characters? I've even in first edition, I never played characters past, like, say, 10th level. And I've played in a convention game once, run by Frank Menser, of a first edition D&D game that was specifically something like 15th or 20th level. Mm-hmm. And it was just an excuse to, like, we're gonna woohoo, we're gonna do a really high level game because we never get to do that. It was basically how it was built. And I played it and I was like, this is different. This is different than because basically the powers didn't matter anymore, right? Everything was solvable via magic. Right, magic just solved everything. We all have to, like, we didn't even have to strategize. It was a big group, I remember. I was trying to coordinate with other players to strategize. Oh, what spells are you bringing? What spells are you bringing? And then, like, quickly became apparent that we had so many spells that didn't matter. Any problem was immediately solvable by magic, and it really just came down to just roleplay.
I think that Frank likes to play at high level. So from what I've seen him writing online, he generally plays at super high level all the time. So I think his regular players have characters in the 30s or 40s levels or something like that, and he's just accustomed to playing at that advanced level. And for example, when I tried to ask him about exactly how he handles falling damage, he kind of said one thing, and then he said a second thing, which was different. And then he was like, well, I guess I just don't pay attention to it because everybody can fly and levitate. So I don't remember the last time anybody took flying damage.
Right. Kind of like eventually everyone's so uber powerful that it doesn't freaking matter. You can do whatever you want. Right. And so,
right.
Whatever.
Well, but again, from a business perspective, look, I would probably make some kind of neat treasure at the end of the trail as well to encourage people to try to get to that point. And like, oh, it'd be great to hit on every attack. And thanks for Disparel in the chat here saying, yeah, 20th level fighters are going to get 4 or 5 attacks nowadays. Good point.
It feels to me a lot like the change in 5th edition to the level curve, which I spent a lot of time talking about in my blog and graphed out to prove that, yes, indeed, it is much easier to get to 10th level for some reason, or 10th to 11th. I can't remember. There's a dip. There's a dip around 10th level where it takes a lot less XP to level up for, and that's based on playtesting. Yeah. They tune those numbers, not on any mathematical equation, but based on playtesting. They're like, this is where people stop playing. So we're going to make it easier to kick them on down the road up to higher level. Right. And so that's what this feels like to me. Is here's another reason, like, people aren't playing 20th level, so here's a reason to.
Yep, totally.
And that's, I don't know, that smells, and then I'll say that's a lot like saying people aren't using inspiration, so we're going to mechanize it instead of like, maybe just cut it.
They should cut it.
Maybe
every time I brush up against... Every time I brush up against fifth edition and have the experience steps from level to level not be a formula, it just bugs the heck out of me. I'm like, what? I can't just remember it like I normally can in classic D&D. I have to look at the table. I mean, and technically that's also something that they try to keep wrapped, not in the public open gaming documents too. So that might have been another reason why they did that. But yeah, good, strong argument, Paul. Very strong argument.
You've run OD&D games for us in the past where we are like 8th, 9th, 10th level, and that feels to me like the top of the power scale. I feel like I don't need another 10 levels on top of this. This is good. This feels like, as powerful as I want exceptional people in the world to be.
I agree with that, and I think that those are the highest, pretty close to the highest level adventures they ever made classically. And I think when Gary was writing, at the transition from original D&D to first edition, he laid out like, here's how long it takes us in our games to level characters up, this many months. And he's like, so here's how long it takes to get to maybe 10th or 11th level. And that's the highest anybody's gotten to in either my game or Dave Arneson's game. So everything else past this is theoretical. And I think that was pretty much as high as things actually got play tested. So I don't think it's too surprising. In theory, I like to, original D&D says the levels can go up as far as you want. And in theory, I like to honor that. But I totally agree with you, Paul. It's trying to play at higher levels is awkward at best.
All right, we are definitely out of time. So, viewers, if you have read these PDFs and you're aware of something that we missed, which obviously we missed stuff. We totally missed the natural 20s critical thing from the last time around. So if we missed something in this document, please leave a comment for us here in the YouTube video. I'm sure when document 3 comes out, we will be talking about this again. So leave us some notes and we will discuss it in a future episode.
Absolutely, and we'll be looking forward to that. This is like such a great discussion. I love digging into these kind of mechanical rules options and seeing a design process run out in the next couple of months. So I'm personally really interested in the next even if I'm not going to play it myself, I'm really interested in thinking about it. And of course, if you're new to the channel, remember that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us. We're on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and Facebook and GitHub, because we're coders, and TikTok. And we do have the handle Wandering DMs on all of those sites. So look for this there, and you'll get updates about the next time we do a One D&D show.
If you prefer to listen to our shows in audio-only podcast format, you can do so. Those files are available at our website at wanderingdms.com and through various podcast carriers such as Spotify and Google Podcasts and iTunes. If you are listening to us at one of those sites right now, please take a moment to rate and review us there. That helps other users of that site find us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really do. And of course, huge thanks to our patrons who support the Wandering DM show. And if you'd like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. See a couple different tiers. Among the benefits is our private Discord server. And we constantly have ongoing conversations about all of our shows and old school rules and 5th edition rules going on there. And we get great insights that we can fold into our shows going forward. And we have after party chat right after every show. So we'll be there in about 10 minutes. To continue this discussion about One D&D and how it compares to earlier rules live on video, and we hope that you can join us there for that. You'll be there for that today, Paul, yes?
I will indeed.
Awesome.
Yep. So come join us. I'm sure we'll dissect these documents even more. I'm willing to bet that a few of our viewers have dug into them themselves.
Absolutely, of course. And look for our other shows. I'll be back tomorrow night, Monday night, 11 p.m. Eastern Time, as I play more classic first edition AD&D video games like Pool of Radiance is what I'm working through right at the moment. We'll have another Book of War wargaming show happening a week from Thursday. And, I'll just throw out one of the bullet points in this One D&D document of things they're going to do in the future. There's only 8 bullet points, but one of them was streamlined rules for making a base for your player characters. And that is exactly what Paul and I were initially going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about that next week, next Sunday, strongholds for your player characters in D&D. And maybe we're going to predict something you might see in One D&D if it's a good idea. So please join us for that. We are live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so we hope you'll join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.